and welcome to Geert Kersten. Welcome to BioTech Health X. Today we are going to be talking about the CEL-SCI and your lead drug candidate, Multikine. Our discussion is going to begin with a phase 3 clinical trial that ended in the spring of 2020 with top-line results that were released in June 2021, along with the most recent news of FDA approval of a confirmatory study. So welcome. How are you today?
Well, thank you, Allison. I'm very well, thank you. Just driving it forward.
Yes, absolutely. So let's begin the discussion today with could you start by explaining what Multikine is and how it works, and then also explain how it's different from traditional approaches and treatments?
So think about it. We all know people who've had cancer, right? Hopefully they were cured, but then there are those people where we said, oh, it's great, it's gone. 6 months later, it comes back, and then it generally leads to the death of the patient. We must make the first treatment more successful, which is what the surgeons do. They combine surgery, radiation, and chemo. But all the new medicines, the great immunotherapy drugs, they're all being tested in dying cancer patients whose immune systems have already been destroyed. We're saying you have to turn that upside down. You have to activate the immune system to fight the cancer before you destroy it with surgery, radiation, chemo. But it's not that simple.
Yeah.
Because you only have 3 weeks. You're not allowed to delay the surgery because the surgery is the proven therapy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So as far as I know, we're the only ones who've shown survival in that setting. Definitely in head and neck cancer, which is one of the biggest out there and a gruesome one.
Mm-hmm. And as we mentioned, you mentioned the phase 3 trial. We mentioned that particular piece of this. So let's dive a little bit more into that phase 3 clinical trial of Multikine. You received a go-ahead from 24 regulatory agencies worldwide. We're talking the US, Canada, France, and the United Kingdom, with the study accruing its very first patient in early 2011, and you achieved complete enrollment in September of 2016. So what
was a long time.
That is a long time.
Fortunately, what we have to do going forward, and we just got clearance from FDA for that, and that's a big deal, it's much shorter. It's much, much smaller. So we gave these patients our drug for 3 weeks. Remember, you can't give it longer because you will delay the surgery. Then they get their normal treatments. Everybody gets surgery, and then some people get radiation, and others get radiation plus chemo. So if you have different risk factors, they add the chemo. And then came something no one has ever seen. The one half of the study where you do surgery and radiation after our drug had massive survival benefit. The other half where you add the chemo, it didn't work. So we talked to the regulators, and they're all very impressed. They all like it, but they say we can't change our procedures for you. So therefore, we had to work out an agreement on how to do a small confirmatory study.
Okay. So when we're talking about that then leading to the FDA, like you just said, the approval for this confirmatory study, how were you able then, when you're talking about the differences that you noticed, able to precisely define the target patient population for the Multikine study, particularly those with no lymph node involvement and low PD-L1 tumor expression?
Okay, it gets a little scientific, but you would think, oh yes, you should go for approval with people who get surgery and radiation. But you can't do that because we give our drug before surgery. You don't know until after surgery whether it's radiation plus chemo. So that didn't work. We had to find another way. This is a very important point. For dying cancer patients, regulators really don't worry about side effects. I mean, they even have black label boxes on there saying this drug may kill you, right? And we hear about the horrible toxicities. For our patients who are newly diagnosed, they care a lot. Let's say 40% of them survive. Do no harm, right, is the rule number one for a physician.
Mm-hmm.
So our drug has to be completely safe, no possibility of harm, and have a high probability of success. So the way we figure it out is our drug is not one of those that block things, which, by the way, take months. Keytruda, Opdivo, the super drugs, they block something. That's why they take months, and that's why in many cancers they don't work up front, right? But In head and neck cancer, they didn't work up front, what we do in head and neck area. But we help your healthy immune system. There are about, let's call it 3 billion immune cells in your body, but they don't know there's a tumor. We help them see the tumor. And that's why in these 3 weeks, we have patients where the tumor is completely gone. And we're talking nasty head and neck cancer, squamous cell carcinoma, a very, very bad one. It's because we activate the immune system. So therefore, what we did is we focused, and these are all very sick people, we focused on those who still have a healthy immune system. So the immune system can do the job, and that means N0, no lymph nodes that are cancerous, because if they're cancerous, they're not functional anymore. And PD-L1 low, it's the opposite of the super drugs, Keytruda and Opdivo, which work in the 30% of patients who have a lot, and we work in the 70% that don't have a lot. Now comes, you've got to look at that data though, because people say, well, are you going to be successful or not? We are not testing a hypothesis. We're simply repeating what we already did, but with a very small targeted population. And the survival with our drug compared to, it's 73% versus 45% in the control group. It's fairly obvious what group you want to be in, right?
Right.
And that's in a disease where literally no one has had any progress. But unfortunately, we have to do that study. And this is where we are right now.
So then talk a little bit more about the criteria then to select those specific kinds of patients.
So they have to be stage 3 and 4 head and neck cancer. That means the worst stages. Newly diagnosed. And then the physicians will do their normal testing. And that involves how many lymph nodes are cancerous or not. And we want those people who have no cancerous lymph nodes. And then through a tumor biopsy, which they do already, we can see what the level of PD-L1 is. It's the #1 marker in cancer that everybody is looking for. And we want those people that have a low level of PD-L1. When you combine that, you're literally able to take all of the best survivors out of our huge study of 928. And now we have to do a small study to repeat this. Basically, those are the rules, right? And we're not going to change the rules, so we just simply do what we're told. That's why the study is only 212 patients, because if you have a huge survival benefit, you don't need large numbers. So hopefully we can get that done quickly. Hopefully then it's a registration study, meaning FDA has agreed that this is a study designed for approval. And just so you know, it's the 6th biggest cancer in the world. And there has literally been nothing in this area, in the pre-surgical area, in decades. Nothing that's helped these people.
And now we have something that we can look at. You mentioned the FDA, so let's talk about that. And have you discussed for me the specific challenges that you have and the breakthroughs in your discussions that you've been having with the FDA regarding Multikine's study design and its approval path?
Well, first of all, I learned that FDA is just like everybody else, right? They have to get comfortable with you. Can I trust you or not? And that takes time. You have to prove yourself. That takes more than one meeting. They also don't give you black and white answers because they can't lock themselves down. They don't have all of the information. So you have to make proposals. And we learned, which is not normal, that we are held to a higher standard with these newly diagnosed patients. Like I said, if someone who's close to you has cancer at the beginning, for the first treatment, you're not willing to accept anything risky that might have nasty side effects.
Right.
If they're at the stage where they're dying in any case, you're willing to try just about anything as long as it helps, right?
That's right.
That is how FDA looks at it also. You cannot harm the percentage that's going to live, except you don't know who's going to live out of all these people. So you cannot harm anyone. And that was the key. We didn't understand that initially, but it makes perfect sense because it's so much stricter standard. And by FDA saying, go ahead, they must have reviewed this and they must have reached the conclusion of extreme safety and high probability of success. And then you look at our data, you see, I mean, the statisticians, I'm not a statistician, but the statisticians tell me that we have a well over 95% chance of success, which is incredible because the biggest risk for the drug development is the scientific risk, right?
Mm-hmm.
And money, you can always find. Sometimes it's more expensive, sometimes less expensive. These stocks are highly volatile. But if you have something, this is a registrational study, a small one. If you're successful, you can create a completely new class of cancer treatments, which is going to treat a large number of people and make an enormous difference. So there's always money to be found. And
Sure.
by the way, this is also very important. Literally every question from a pharma company, big biotechnology fund, any big investor over the last 6 months has been, I see you have great data, but what does FDA say? Right? Because, I mean, who are we, right? Data looks great, but if FDA doesn't agree with you, you have problems. Well, FDA agreed with us.
So when you're having these discussions with the FDA, how is that changing, if at all, how you're approaching these treatments? Does it have any impact, or it's just ongoing discussions?
The way you do it is you propose something. FDA doesn't go and tell you exactly what they want. You propose a path forward, and they will respond. And then in our case, they will actually help you along. They've said, we want to help you, right? Mm-hmm. So many people talk about FDA saying, oh, they're in the pockets of big pharma, etc. I see absolutely nothing like this. They've been responsive to us. The meetings have been full of people. They're trying to help, except there are certain procedures that they have to follow, and we therefore have to do this work. So that's basically how it's done. We put the information forth, they comment on it, they respond, they suggest, and that's how these agreements are reached.
Okay. Now, in terms of the difference between the phase 3 versus the confirmatory study, what are some of the primary differences in the objectives between the original phase 3 study and the upcoming confirmatory study?
It's a beautiful question. Usually, a phase 3 in cancer is, let's say, a company showed that it has tumor responses, and the FDA gives them an approval, which is something that may happen during the course of our study, right? But because we show tumor responses that then translate into survival very clearly. So that's a 50-50 shot that people are right. Tumor responses don't always lead to increased survival, but sometimes do. In our case, we don't have that issue. We already know the survival of the people we're picking. So the people we're picking out with the high statistical value, so it's very good, they have a 73% 5-year survival versus 45%. I mean, this is a long time. We don't have to go this long in the study, but it tells you that the drug really works exceedingly well. Now, what do you have to show for an approval? You have to show a 10% improvement. By the way, they call these absolutes. So from 45 to 55 is a 10% absolute improvement. So we have the difference between 45 and 73, so it's 28. Bottom line is, we have more than twice the amount of a survival benefit that we know exists than we actually need for an approval. Mm-hmm. And then we can go further into details. Essentially, in the control group, people are dying 3 times faster than they are in the group getting our drug. And statistically, under the worst case scenario, they're still dying much faster. So every statistician and clinician tells me this is unusual because you are simply redoing something that where you already know the results. Mm-hmm. Therefore, you can never say it's 100%, but you have a really good shot of being right.
How do you then ensure the reproducibility of those results?
Oh, you don't change anything. So certain regulators like this so much, they wanted us to add more patient classes because they say this makes perfect sense. Mm-hmm. And we said, no, we don't want to do that. We don't want to introduce any new variables. We want to confirm what has already been done. It reduces the risk. Then what happens is essentially most likely will be partnering with a big pharma company because you have to run lots and lots of studies. This should also be developed for melanoma, for breast cancer, for cervical, for other cancers, right? Because it's not limited to head and neck cancer. It's not toxic. And the same principle applies to all cancers. So you go, the drug development is somewhat artificial. You create these artificial statistical constructs and you make sure you reach the finish line. Once you're approved, then you start broadening out and you do lots of studies. And that's the goal. No changes in the study. Therefore, you're not introducing new risk.
All right. So how significant then is the survival benefit observed with Multikine's treatment compared to just standard care?
Well, think about it. It's kind of, if you want to live, it's kind of simple, right? It's the gold standard for approval, right? You cannot do better than what they call overall survival. It's the absolute gold standard. Most drugs never shows an overall survival benefit and they still come to market. So if you have a good overall survival benefit in a disease where no one has succeeded and you add no toxicity, why would anyone want to stand in your way, much less be able to stand in your way?
Right. If there's no choice, and this is the one that it's there.
In fact, what should happen is you become part of the new standard of care. So let's hope we never get this cancer. But if we did, which one would you rather do? The treatment that gives you a 73% survival or the one that gives you 45% survival?
Right.
In the end, it's really simple. People want to live. Doctors want to give drugs that help people live. And by the way, in this case, we're saving the healthcare system an enormous amount of patients. Because if we don't die, we don't have the enormous cost of a dying cancer patient, and we're productive, which is exactly where we should be going. Yeah. And by the way, you wouldn't believe the costs. There's a recent company that was recently approved in melanoma. They're charging $510,000. It's crazy. It's out of control. We would never charge that much, but all of these drugs are expensive.
Right.
So these companies become very valuable then.
That is a big conversation when you're talking about some of these treatments, the cost of treatment, and sometimes the cost of a treatment that doesn't have as high probably of a probability rate of survival as we're talking about right now.
What I can tell you is I've had a lot of people come from Europe in the last few weeks and visit with us. And because they're more cost conscious, right? And they see how this can save an enormous amount of not just lives, but an enormous amount of money. And so, in fact, I wouldn't be surprised if our future fundings a lot of it comes from Europe. And so there's a lot of interest. That's always a good thing.
All right.
So, we're trying to change the system. We should still help dying cancer patients, but wouldn't it be much better if I can help them never become dying cancer patients, if I can stop the disease before they get to that stage?
Yes. Yes, I think everybody would agree with that.
Yeah, and add no toxicity. Think about that one. Right now, we accept horrendous toxicity. Why? Because we don't know it can't be done without toxicity.
Right.
Once people see you can do it without toxicity, it's the idea. It's like the American Revolution. It started the French Revolution because you put an idea into people's minds. It can be done. This is much bigger than our work here. We're going to help a lot of people, but you prove this concept, it's an idea that will grow.
And as we continue to look forward, then what are some of the next steps in research for the after this confirmatory study?
During the study, what you want to do is studies, probably what they call academic studies, where you work with universities. And they will have many ideas. I've always realized that there's so many smart people out there, diseases that I've never even heard of where this drug may be useful. But the obvious ones are melanoma, which is super responsive to immunotherapy. Another obvious one is cervical or anal, because this drug has been shown to kill human papillomavirus. I mean, there are women who cannot clear the virus, right? We've tested in HIV-infected women who cannot clear it. It worked. So we can help those women who cannot clear the HPV. It's the cause of their cancer. The same in anal cancer. So this drug could be used to kill both the virus that causes the cancer as well as the cancer itself. But it doesn't do it directly. It helps your immune system kill it. That's the key.
I know we touched on it just a little bit about hopefully down the road, this could be something that could be used across other types of cancers or used for other kinds of treatments. Are there any plans for that, or is that still a discussion down the road as you continue in this process?
We're the little guys, okay? We're trying to turn the world upside down. On the other hand, this is the US. And that's generally how it works here. The little guy comes out of nowhere and has a better product. And because investors look for the little guy that can be a big win, they can make it to the finish line. And then they become the big guys. So the answer is, we are going to focus on getting this drug to market, and then probably partner or sell to a big company.
Okay.
Because why would you set up your own sales force around the world? Why would you recreate something that already exists all over the place? But we are the best in our area.
We love to hear that. And we love to see the determination to get the treatment approved. Of course, that is very impressive to watch this all happen. So biotech trials have really proven one thing, that it's hard to get approved. And so from our vantage point, as we see all of this, you seem to be fighting that good fight as you're talking about right now as the little guy, but hopefully you're changing some lives and you're helping your patients. And of course, also we have to talk about the shareholders, and we want them to get the return on their investment as well. So as we wrap things up here today, what are some messages or a message that you have for the patients who are in need? Let's start with the patients first. What message do you have for them?
So one of our key opinion leaders, I got a quote from him today, and I should have brought it with me. I'm sorry I didn't. But he says that we've had absolutely zero progress in the treatment of the curative setting of head and neck cancer. We're in the curative setting, right? 40% will survive, 60% won't, but the goal is to cure you. So then he says there's been nothing in decades. And Multikine, our drug, is the first that has the chance to change things. So that's a big deal, right? Imagine they cut your tongue out, you lose your teeth from the radio. It's just a horrible disease. And by the way, this disease is a bit like the weed in your backyard. You weed and weed, you shouldn't think you get rid of it, and 2 weeks later it's back. That's what this disease is like.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, I got you. You're asking something else.
I
get so excited, and
I can tell.
So for the patients and non-toxicity, right? Geez, how many non-toxic drugs are out there? Every family is affected by cancer. Everybody knows someone, but little guys like us need help, because I can tell you, Wall Street plays its games. So we have this roller coaster. Literally 6 years ago, our stock was beaten up. We were below $1. Then, and the games they play, it's incredible. Then we were at $41. And now we're down again to like 140. Does any of that make sense? No. But if you're an investor, that's where the opportunity comes in. You look at what these companies have done. Doesn't mean you have to trust everything. And then you look at what the regulators are saying. So in our case, you know that what we're telling you is correct because FDA agreed to it. FDA has all of the data. FDA is the ultimate arbiter. And therefore, if they agree to it, it means that we have a super safe drug that they must obviously feel is really going to help patients. They're fine with a small study, which confirms that it has to be a very good survival data. And everybody who follows the business understands that there are procedures that you have to follow. They're not going to change procedures for us. They changed procedures for the COVID vaccine, but they're not changing procedures for little companies.
So is that your message to the shareholders, or is there another
message for the shareholders? Is, guys, we've persisted. We're up, we're down. The data is there. I don't like it when we're down. I much prefer it when we're up. I continue buying stock. Yeah, I don't want to seem promotional here, but we need the help of a lot of people. It takes a village. I've realized that a long time ago. We have a team. We have clinicians who support us. We have statisticians who support us. We have people at the regulators who've told us they want to help us. But we need the help of a lot of people as a small company to change the world.
Well, your determination is certainly impressive. Mr. Kersten, thank you so much for joining us and walking us through this. It's been very, very interesting.
Thank you, Allison. You make it easy.